Morning. Thank you, Jim, for reading that text, and you might keep your Bibles open to that point. We'll come back and read a little bit farther in chapter 90 of the Psalms. But first thing I want you to notice this morning is that there's been a shift in the universe. The entire Weaver clan is sitting on the north side of the church building this morning. I hope there's a picture taken so this can be saved for 51 years. 51 years this hasn't happened. But it's happened today. Which shows us just what we sang. Time is filled with swift transition. Naught of earth unmoved can stand. Now we'll joke about it, but it's absolutely true. Have you noticed there's nothing of this world that goes unchanged? Time moves on. Now the title for this morning's lesson, you might have seen it out on the marquee or somewhere else. It's time management. And when I wrote that down, I meant to put a question mark at the end of it because time management. You ever try to manage time? Go ahead and chuckle if you want to. Ha ha ha, that's kind of funny. You can't manage time. Now I understand what the creators of that phrase and that idea were thinking. They were thinking we need to manage our lives and order our lives so that we get our priorities lined up and do the most important things first. That's what we normally think of when we refer to time management. But actually time management is a misnomer. It's a misnaming. You cannot manage time. Of all the things we cannot change, it is time. I don't know if you've ever thought about defining time, but have you? How would you define time? Most things, when I think about a definition, I need to go to the dictionary. I already have some idea of what it is and how the dictionary might say it, especially if I take some time and think about it. And then I get to the dictionary and that's right, that's what it says. And I never thought of it quite like this or quite like that, the way the dictionary definition offers it. But I went to the dictionary to get a definition for time. I went to the encyclopedias to get a definition of time. I went to the internet, source for all wisdom and knowledge, to get a definition of time. And this is pretty much the best I could come up with. Time, first definition, definition A. The measured or measurable period during which an action, process, or condition exists or continues. Okay. I don't disagree with that, but it still really doesn't tell me what time is. Here's definition B. It's a little closer to what I think it should be, but still leaves a little something to be desired. Definition B states this: a non-spatial continuum that is measured in terms of events which succeed one another from past through present to future. All right. Now all I need to do is get a definition for a non-spatial continuum. And I'm good to go. What is that? Einstein. You know of anybody in your head that's smarter than Einstein? What was Einstein's work revolving around so much all of his life? But the theory of relativity. And I don't know if you've ever looked at the theory of relativity, but it has to do, and it greatly involves time. And how time, he thought, could change, could accelerate and decelerate. But it's sort of like, if I understand it right, when you're on an airplane, if you've ever flown on an airplane, when you're accelerating, you can feel the acceleration. But once the acceleration is gone, you're just on the airplane, and you can't really tell if you're going 100 miles an hour or 500 miles an hour. It's pretty much the same once that sense of acceleration is gone. And so we are in time. Is it moving quickly? Is it moving slowly? I don't know. You tell me. It seems like the older I get, the faster time moves. How many times have you heard someone say that? And you never hear someone who's 10 years old say that. Have you noticed it? You don't have a 10-year-old saying, boy, it seems like things are going faster than they used to when I was 5. But you get up, I don't know where that age is, 45, 50, 75, wherever it is, but things seem like they go faster. And in a mathematical sense, it makes sense, because if you're 5, 1 year is 20% of your lifetime. And when you're 50, well, you see the difference. Time is relevant in many ways. But the thing about time that really bears taking notice is that for each one of us, It's going to end. Amen? We came into this universe somehow, some way, in some moment of time. Whether it was at our conception or at birth, whenever it was, we don't exactly know. We can't even put a marker on that. We know that at some point we're going to leave. And I don't know if you've ever been present when someone has actually died, when they have, as we put it, passed away, because that's what it is to us. They're passing away, passing from this life, passing to something or somewhere else. From a biblical perspective, we know they're going to God. But we don't even understand all the things about that. But at some point in our future, at some moment in time, we will cease to be in time. And we will go into eternity. And I don't know about you, but the more I think about that, the more every hour, every minute, every second takes on meaning right here. If you look at Psalm 91 again, Psalm 90, a little farther down from where Jim stopped. He stopped at verse 6. I want you to look at verse 10. This is a passage I've heard many people speak of. I've used it myself because it gives us somewhat of a measure of our days. As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or, if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone, and we fly away. Have you found that to be pretty much true? I don't know what the median age is today, but for the most part, we think of people, they reach 70, okay, that's about it. As the old King James would put it, 70, and if by reason of strength 80. But after 80 years, what are we living on but borrowed time? You ever heard anybody say that? Well, that's where they get that. God has set a measurement for our days, and this is it. Does that mean that we're all going to get 70 years? Doesn't mean that, does it? Generally speaking, averaging it out, perhaps we would say that's what God is telling us. But what He really wants us to understand is what He's written in other places, that our lives are like the grass. Our lives are like the flowers. We're here one day when the sun rises, and then we wither, and we are gone, and there is no longer a place for us here. Remember that. No longer a place for us here. Even tombstones. I ran across a statistic. Don't you love statistics? Ran across a statistic several years ago that I'd never really thought about before, and somebody had figured up some way, somehow, that a tombstone is really only good for about 15 years. Because after 15 years, very few people, on the average, will come back to a grave to observe the tombstone and have a memory of that loved one at that point. I don't have any idea how they figured that out, but it makes sense. It makes sense that at some point in time, everyone who is dead and been married will be forgotten on this planet. On this planet. On this planet in time. But we are never forgotten of God. Amen? Never forgotten of God. If we keep reading in the Lord's Word, we go to Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Now you might be thinking, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, yeah, that's that famous passage on time. That was it the birds that made this into a song? What? Okay, it was the birds. I thought it was the birds. I didn't take time to look it up because I was pretty sure it was them. But starting in chapter 2, we'll pick up a little bit of the context. And we're not even getting the whole context here at verse 24, chapter 2, 24. But here we are. This is where we're going to start with it this morning at any rate. By the way, anytime we look at something in a sermon, I really encourage you to go home, pull that passage out and look at it in even greater context than what we've examined it here. There's nothing like studying on your own. Nothing like studying on your own. Can I say that again? There's nothing like studying on your own. But here we are today together. Chapter 2, verse 24 of Ecclesiastes. There's nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good.
This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God. Amen. That's what we've been doing the last few days, isn't it? We've been enjoying the surplus, enjoying the prosperity with which God has blessed us. And Solomon says this is a good thing. It is from God. Verse 25. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without God? For to a person who is good in his sight, he has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, while to the sinner he has given the task of gathering and collecting, so that he may give to one who is good in God's sight. This too is vanity and striving after wind. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up. There is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embracing, a time to search and a time to give up as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear apart, a time to sew together, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. I want you to notice, I like to point out when we read this, Solomon never says there's a time for lying and there's a time to be honest. There's a time to be pure and there's a time for promiscuity. There's a time to be generous toward your neighbor and there's a time to steal from your neighbor. He never says there is a time for those things that are ungodly, immoral, unrighteous, or sinful. But for everything else, there's a time. Time is, to use an English word, durative. It goes on. And we live in the process of time, whether we like it or not. And as time goes on, we see that these things come true. There's a time to rejoice over a baby that it's born, but there's a time to mourn over a life that is lost. There's a time to feast. There's a time to fast. There's a time to be at peace with others. There is a time to confront others with difficult situations. There's a time for everything. And that's what time is all about. It's about making use of the time to do those things that are most important to be done in their time. And this is part of growing up in life. When you're little, what's life all about? Playing. It's all about playing. And then you grow, and as you grow, you find out, oh, life's not totally about playing anymore. Now I'm in school. Now I need to learn to work. And kindergarten is sort of a playtime introduction to school, but eventually you get down to business. You get down to brass tacks. Don't, however, make the mistake of thinking that playtime is fun time, but work is not. Can work be fun? Can work be rewarding? Can work be something that we find pleasantness in? There's a time for everything, and sometimes there's work that's not fun, but sometimes there's work that's more than fun. And as you allow God to lead you in life, you will see that He will take you into some places that are not much fun, but the result and the reward is beyond fun. Fun is great, but I've found that when I have fun and it's over, there's no real satisfaction. I need to go back and do that some more. That's why when you pick up a 2-year-old and you swing him around your head and you put him back down on the floor, what does he say? More, Daddy. More, Dad. Do that again. Do it again. Do it again. You're going, oh. They're doing, do it again. Do it again. And it doesn't matter how many times you do it. They will not say, enough, Daddy. I'm satisfied. Why? Because they're little kids, and that's all they know. You grow up. You spend some time on this earth, and you start to change your perspective towards things. Solomon goes on to talk about these kinds of things later on. Look at verse 12. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 12. I know that there's nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. It is the gift of God. That's the second time he said that. It's a gift of God to enjoy the things that God's given you. I know that everything God does will remain forever, but there's nothing to add to it and there's nothing to take from it, for God has so worked that men should fear Him. We're going to see that again. God has so worked that men should fear Him. We're going to see that at the end of Ecclesiastes. But right now, I want you to go to chapter 7. Chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes. One of the things we noted in chapter 3 was that Solomon said there's a time to be born and there's a time to die. Chapter 7, Solomon says this: a good name is better than a good ointment, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. The day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Now, I don't know about you, but if we'd never seen this, if we'd never read this, and somebody said, which is better, being born or dying? Well, I think for a lot of people in this world, the obvious choice would be, oh, being born. That's better. God says, no, the day of your death is a better day. There's more potential for good there. Why? We're leaving time, but what else are we leaving? We're leaving sin. We're leaving this world filled with sin. We're leaving this world filled with all those things that tend to separate us from God. And God says there's a time to be born and you come into this world of sin, but there's also a time to die. And through Solomon, he said, and he taught us, he instructed us, he informed us, he enlightened us. The day of your death is better than the day of your birth. So when I think about this, I think, wow, I'm 56. I think, I had to stop and check, recount. It's 56 or 57. You ever had to do that? I think that's a measure you're getting too old or something. I don't know. Because when you're 12, you're not 12, you're 12 and a half. You know exactly how old you are. But when you get past a certain age, it doesn't matter so much. And in this world, we might think, oh man, he's over 50. He's an old codger. He's going downhill. Well, that's all true, except this is what I'm going towards. I'm going towards the day of my death, and the day of my death is better than the day of my birth. I know people celebrated when I was born. I want people to celebrate when I die because they know where I'm going. I'm leaving time. Time keeps going on, and time runs us down. Time is a great teacher. Time is a great healer, but time eventually kills everybody. Somebody pointed that out once. I thought, oh yeah, time's a great teacher, but it kills all of its students. Time's a great healer, but it kills all of its patients. Eventually, time will run out. And typically we think of that in a negative aspect. But from a godly perspective, time running out is a good thing. It's a good thing. And we put the burden on doctors sometimes when one of our loved ones becomes sick, becomes ill, and they've got what we call a terminal disease. A disease that we know is going to end their life, or at least that's what we're thinking it will do. And we say to the doctor, how long do they have, or how long do I have if you're the one with that disease? And the doctor struggles, and they look and they see by statistics and other experiences that people have had with this sickness or this disease, well, it's probably about 6 months or 6 weeks. Now, how many times has it happened to you, or happened to someone you know, or you've heard about it? Doctor says you've got 6 weeks and they live for 6 years. Bless their hearts, the doctors don't know. They're not trying to be God. They're trying to help us out. But even those most professional, even those most knowledgeable, even those with the most information do not know when any of us are going to die. I like that. I like for God to be in control. I like for God to be the one who knows. I like for God to be the one to say the day of your death is better than the day of your birth. And when we get to the end of Ecclesiastes, the last few words that Solomon writes as he closes out this examination of life. Chapter 12, verse 13, the conclusion, when all has been said, is fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. When will He bring every act into judgment? When time is concluded. There was a big deal just a little while ago. People thought that the Mayans were predicting that the world would end. When was it? Friday last? I forget now. Somebody observed, well, the Mayans didn't say it was going to end. They just ran out of rock on their calendar. Didn't have any more room for any more dates. But everybody was up in arms. And it was just earlier this same year, somebody had said, for whatever reason, I don't remember the reason now, but they said the world's going to end on Was it May the 21st? Anybody remember that? You don't remember that now, do we? Because people are always saying crazy things like that. Who knows when the world's going to end? God knows that. And it may be 1,000 years from now, but who knows when Marty Kessler is going to end? Only God. I might have 5 minutes. You might have 5 minutes. We may not have that much. Are you ready? This passage says, fear God and keep His commandments, for that's the whole of every man. Have you done this? If your time was now, would you be ready? If the Lord decided to call your name now, would that be okay? If this was the end of your days, would your death be better than your birth? Would you go to glory or would you go to condemnation? Time is one thing. Eternity is another. I think Jesus wanted us to understand some things about time and its end. And so He taught us in Luke chapter 12. If you want to go there, Luke chapter 12. I want us to look at this one parable that sort of brings all this home, to me anyway. Luke chapter 12, starting at verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over you? I like that. Jesus said, man. Hey, man. Man, who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over you? Then he said to them, Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. Now you look at that and you think, oh, this is a good lesson on greed. Well, yes, it is a good lesson on greed, but do you see what he says? Your life does not consist of your possessions. Doesn't that address a philosophy that so many seem to have in this world? That our life is so tied to this earth that our life is defined by our possessions. How much do you have? How much do you own? What's your net worth? God says that's not what it's all about. I sent my Son to show you your life does not consist of what you possess. He told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? Then he said, This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, what did God say to him? You fool. You fool. Now, I know God does not say that lightly because Jesus taught us back in the Sermon on the Mount, don't call somebody a fool. But God calls him a fool. This very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? Jesus says, So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. I have a brief list. It really is brief. These are just a few people, famous celebrities, who died this year. How many of you remember Jack Klugman? Remember the Odd Couple? It wasn't that long ago that his buddy Walter Matthau died, and now Jack Klugman is gone. Neil Armstrong. I hope everybody knows who Neil Armstrong is. First man set foot on the moon. Whitney Houston. We heard about Whitney Houston's passing. It was in the news for a long time. Larry Hagman. You might know Larry Hagman as J.R. Ewing. I will always think of Larry Hagman as Major Nelson. I dream of Jeannie. Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar. Who was Zig Ziglar? He was the man of positivation. He was just the most positive guy in the world. Well, he's gone. George McGovern. You younger folks probably won't know who George McGovern was, but there was a day when George McGovern's name was so well known in this country, he was a candidate for the presidency. Alex Karras, very popular, well-known football star of times past. Andy Williams died. Didn't that break your heart, especially at Christmas season? He had such a great Christmas show, his family-oriented Christmas show. It was wonderful. Andy's gone. He's dead and gone. Phyllis Diller. Wasn't she a hoot? She was a riot. Jerry Nelson. Now, you might not know that name, Jerry Nelson, but if I said, ha, 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 one, two Christians, three Christians, count them, count them. Jerry Nelson was the voice of the Count on Sesame Street. We all know that voice. We know that character. Doesn't matter how young or old you are. We know who the Count is. Well, that was Jerry Nelson. Now he's gone. Michael Clark Duncan. The great, big, huge black guy. He was the guy who starred in The Green Mile. Is that the name of The Green Mile? Where he was falsely accused of crime and he had the ability to bring life back sometime. It was a great story with Tom Hanks. Just a really neat story. He's dead. Now you look at a guy like that, you think, my, he's a monster of a man. He's got more muscles than just huge, strong, powerful guy. But he's dead. Not that old. Rodney King, remember Rodney King from the LA riots years ago? Can't we all just get along? He's gone. Some of you might know Richard Dawson, TV star from long ago. Norman Schwarzkopf died. I was surprised to hear that. I didn't realize he was 78. Almost by reason of strength, he made it to 80, but now he's gone. Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees. I remember when the Bee Gees were it was like nobody could be better than the Bee Gees, and now Robin Gibb is dead. Andy Griffith and George Lindsay both died. Of course, we know Andy Griffith was sheriff of Mayberry, and George Lindsay was Goober. You think about people like these and how popular they were. Was there anybody more popular in his day than Davy Jones of the Monkees? And now he's gone. You think about the privilege they had. You think about the money they had. You think about the opportunities they had. How many of these people would you have been willing to trade places with to have the stuff of this world that they have? I'm thinking, man, any of these guys or ladies, they had a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't want to take anything from them, but if I could have what they've got materially, boy, I'd never have to worry about another thing financially. Would you trade places with them now? I'm not trying to pass judgment on any of these folks. But probably you, like I, are wondering, oh, were they right with the Lord? Because we understand it doesn't matter how popular you are here. It doesn't matter how powerful you are here. It doesn't matter how wealthy, how rich you are here. There will be a point in time when there will be no more time. They have left. Their fame, their money, their influence, their popularity didn't stop that. Time marches on, and it has claimed each of these. And in time, it will claim each of us. Are we going to be like the rich man? Will God say to us, you fool? Or will He say to us, well done, good and faithful servant. Come into the joys prepared for you from when? From the foundation of the world. Before God set time in place, He had a place prepared for you and for me. That's why I believe He says in Ecclesiastes, the day of your death is better than the day of your birth. Look at it from God's perspective. If we are ready to die, look what we inherit at death. Look what we come into. That's the day when we meet the Lord, our Savior, Jesus Christ. That's the day when we face the eternal kingdom, and we don't just face it, we inherit that. It becomes ours. This man put his faith in his crops, and he died and was found to be in poverty before God. You and I can be rich. I cannot control time whatsoever, but I can control my life. I can decide what I'm going to do with my time. I can decide if I'm going to live in a righteous fashion or if I'm going to live in an ungodly fashion. I can decide if I'm going to put God first or myself first. I'm going to decide if I want to do what I know to be right or if I'm going to serve my own flesh selfishly and immaturely. I can make that choice, and you can make that choice. If you've made that choice, may the Lord bless you, and may you continue with strength to fulfill your commitment to Him. If you've never made that choice, however, you're just like this rich farmer. Do not die today outside of Christ. Do not come to the end of your time and be lost. We're about to the end of a year. People are making resolutions. Would there be any resolution more profound than to give your life to God? Let's stand and sing the invitation song.